buys drinks tonight. They were here.
Well, you start with me.
Okay, thank you all very much for taking the time. Give you another second. Thanks very much for taking the time to join us today. We are a tired lot, but we are a happy lot. We announced an agreement this afternoon on the state's budget with the legislative leaders, Speaker Sheldon Silver and Senate Majority Leader Dean Skelos. It is a budget that we've worked on very hard for a long time, but it's a budget that we can all be very proud of. There are no new taxes in the budget. There are no new fees. It is a very honest, straightforward document that exhibits the fiscal discipline and fiscal integrity that we've been talking about. It also evidences the priorities that we've been talking about. It's all about jobs, jobs, jobs. It's all about economic development. New York Works is the centerpiece. We have a very aggressive roads and bridges infrastructure program that this budget will finance. The SUNY 2020 program, the higher education program that marries development at SUNY and using SUNY as an economic generator for regional development. The government performance and government accountability. There are a lot of elements of the budget that will help us do our job better, the consolidation of the business enterprises. We've eliminated a lot of boards and commissions that we didn't need, so there's a lot of streamlining of state government. I'm very excited about the reforms to education that are in the budget, the teacher evaluation process that's going to be going into place statewide. We've linked the increase in state aid to education to a locality having their evaluation in place at the end of the year. So we're actually using the money, the state money, to incentivize performance, which is the way it should be. It's not just funding, it's funding when a government performs. So there's a lot of good news in there, and you'll hear more of that, of the budget in a moment. Probably more than anything else, the leaders, legislative leaders say that it's going to be done this week, which means it's going to be done on time. Now, this is a concept that when you say we got the budget done on time, most people say, big deal. You're supposed to get it done on time. But it is actually a big deal in Albany to get it done on time. For many years, it wasn't done on time, and that became a metaphor in some ways and a symbol for the dysfunction of Albany. And frankly, a symbol of dysfunction that portrayed an arrogance of government. You know, in people's lives, they have to get things done by the deadline. You know, we want taxes paid by the deadline. When government couldn't live by its own deadline, it really suggested the disconnect, and that went on year after year after year for Albany. So part of what we said to the people of this state 15 months ago was we're going to bring competence, we're going to bring integrity, and we're going to make the government perform. And we did last year, and with this budget, we did once again. Really, applause to the legislative leaders. I have nothing but praise for the Senate and the Assembly, for the leadership and for the members. They worked day and night to get this done. Not only is this a budget that's done on time, I think this is a smart, intelligent document, and probably one of the best budgets that's been done in a long time. And the legislative leaders said they were committed to getting it done on time, and they did. So kudos again to both houses who put the politics aside and really focused on public service, as they've been doing for a while. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our great secretary, who has shown, as has Mylan and Howard and Bob, that human beings really don't need sleep. You know, that is a myth. We just conducted a little study. Doctor, you may be interested in this. You can keep human beings up for 5 straight days, and they can still do math. That we learned, because the numbers balance in the budget. With that, I'll turn it over to Secretary to the Governor, Larry Schwartz.
Thank you, Governor. Wait till next week when we really start counting the numbers again. Thank you very much. Governor Cuomo's first budget, I think, set the stage, to get the state's fiscal house in order and to put New York State back on the right track, as well as put people first. I think his second budget has now solidified his priorities and his commitments to fiscal responsibility, to job creation, to reinventing government or reimagining government, which calls for government accountability, greater efficiency, a smart government, and one that demands better performance. This second budget invests in New Yorkers and their communities. This budget invests not only in our economy, but in our school children, in the safety of our citizens, in our youth, and it is a major win for our taxpayers. This is also a budget of promises made and promises kept. No new taxes, no fee increases, as the governor said, no gimmicks, spending growth at 2%, school aid and Medicaid increased at the 4% level as promised, pension reform, teacher evaluation reform, consolidating agencies and functions to make government cheaper and work better, as well as eliminating unnecessary boards and commissions. Governor, thank you. New York is back on track and working for the people of our state. I want to now ask our budget director first, Bob Megna, to go over in more detail some of the fiscal accomplishments. Then Howard Glazer, the Director of State Operations, is going to talk more about probably the biggest and most important accomplishment in this budget, which is investing in our economy through New York Works and creating tens of thousands of jobs. And then we're going to ask Mylan Dennerstein, counsel to the governor, to talk about the initiatives on how this budget invests in our people and our communities. Bob?
Thanks, Larry. Thank you, Governor. Again, I think it's very important to recognize how fiscally sound this budget is and how it builds on the important work that the governor did last year in eliminating a $10 billion budget gap and eliminating a lot of the shams that were part of the budget process in the past. This budget certainly builds on that and achieves some very important metrics. And I'll go over a few of those quickly so that we can move on. As Larry mentioned, state spending at or below 2% for 2 consecutive years. This is declines in all fund spending, the first time since at least 1983. The reason we say that is because we don't have records of all fund spending before 1983. I'd be willing to bet that it goes back a lot further than that, where we've had actual declines in all fund spending for 2 years in a row. Again, to reiterate what Larry said, no new taxes, no gimmicks, no use of one-shots to finance ongoing state expenditures. So this is a very clean, a very efficient, a very focused budget. And again, I think a very important point is that this budget has an out-year gap, so looking out into the future. So it's important to recognize when you do budgets, sometimes you can do a one-year budget and then you let the out years of the financial plan, balloon out. This budget does not do that. It maintains fiscal integrity over the next 3 to 5 years. The projected first-year out-year gap is $950 million. That's only 1.5% of general fund spending. The important point there is that 950 has that million begins with an M and not a B. It's been a long time since we've had a situation where our out-year gaps don't begin with billions, but only with millions. When the governor took office, we had a almost $15 billion budget gap, which represented 26% of general fund spending. So we're down to 1.5%. And here is a diagram which I think puts it all in perspective. When the governor took office, he was facing a situation of the dotted line above. The combination of the past two budgets put us on that lower trajectory on the bottom. We've eliminated almost $72 billion of cumulative deficit over the next few years. And how does that show up? Well, state operating funds budget is going to grow by 2%, which is the parameter that the governor stuck to and said we were going to achieve, and we did. And we have a situation where all fund spending is actually declining for 2 years in a row, as we talked about. Again, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Howard Glazer, and he can talk about some of the important economic development aspects.
Thanks very much, Bob. From the first day of the governor's administration last year, even before the first day when he campaigned, he made it very clear that his first job, his number one priority as governor, was jobs, growing the economy, growing jobs, putting New Yorkers back to work, and making New York once again a place where people wanted to do business. If you know the governor, you know that one thing that does not always mean is just spending money, because at the end of the day, it's about performance, a performance-based government, a performance-based budget. We knew that in this budget we would have to make investments. The governor's challenge to us was not just to spend the money, but show me how this government can work to make New York open for business in an intelligent way. Several themes really came through from the State of the State and the budget this year. The concept of entrepreneurial government, a government that is creative, is not just getting out of the way, but is active in assisting, taking the great resources that this state has to make it the place to invest and live in the United States. Doing that by taking the great capacity of the state, the resources of the state, the ability of the state to coordinate, and marrying it to regional priorities. A centralized planning function, resource function, and local priorities, because it's the local government and the local community that knows best what they need. And through that process, making sure that the state is doing three things Governor talked about in the budget and the State of the State. How do you accelerate, coordinate this government, leverage the state resources that we do have to meet those goals that the regions have? In the past, this is not an easy task to do. This government is dysfunctional in many ways coming into it a year ago, and how you invest, particularly capital and infrastructure investment and business investment, is one way we saw that kind of failing. You have on the capital side 45 different state agencies do a capital plan. 21 agencies, 24 authorities. It's one state. You don't have one way to grow, to invest capital. You even see that specifically in one region. The best example is Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. That's NY, New Jersey. Department of Transportation, MTA, all doing basically the same thing. They're doing a transportation system in the same place. And yet, they don't even talk to each other. They had no reason to talk to each other. Thruway, Bridge Authority, both running a highway system. They talk to each other now, even though they don't sit together. Thruway Authority, Bridge Authority, same thing. They're doing a transportation system often in the same areas, but without any coordination. On an annual basis, that's $16 billion of capital spending. Currently today, over $60 billion in capital plans from state agencies and authorities that don't even talk to each other. You can put more money into that system, but you won't get a better result unless you get that government to work together. Sounds relatively simple, hasn't been done. That's no way to run a railroad, a highway, or a state if we're going to meet the priorities that we need to do to grow this government, grow this state. New York Works Task Force is an initiative in the budget accepted by the legislature. First time ever, a panel appointed by the governor and by the legislature will work to do several things. First, to coordinate among all these agencies and authorities to make sure that they're working together in an intelligent way. A master state capital plan. The statute passed requires agencies and authorities to work together in a coordinated body. Recommendations to be made by this task force for capital investment. Accelerating projects, doing things like expediting permits, advancing funding, and finding creative ways to finance. We have a new law that was passed in December, design-build legislation. Allows us to cut months and months off of getting a project from the contracting point to in the ground. So all of that together is a new way, dramatically new way of doing business in the state to spend the state resources that we have. We have to do those things even before we commit additional resources to try to invest in the state's economy. On the budget numbers, leverage very important to us. A little hard to see the chart. Basic point is this. There's $743 million of new money in this budget, leveraging $15 billion of investment across infrastructure, economic development, and other areas. The rest leveraged from the federal government, from private and other sources. Talked about statewide capacity and taking that funding of statewide capacity, matching it to the regional priorities. Second round of regional economic councils was funded in this budget. Successful first year. The second year increased from $130 to $150 million. Plus, on top of that, the Buffalo Initiative, the Buffalo so-called Billion Initiative, $100 million in this budget in tax credits and in cash to assist Western New York. A second round of SUNY 2020. First round last year, very successful with university centers. Expanded this year, university-wide. The idea being translate those SUNY schools into the economic engines that they really can be. We also fully funded the Nanotech Center at Albany. We announced last year the $4 billion of investment jointly by IBM, Intel, Taiwan Semiconductor, Samsung, and Global Foundries. And in this budget, the legislature agreed for full funding of that. That's going to create thousands of jobs, not just in Albany, but across the state, and make New York really the leader in this new technology. That's the regional priorities on the economic side. What the New York Works Task Force allows us to do is also focus new infrastructure spending throughout the roads, bridges, and other areas. So you can see from the slide here, I think we talked about this a couple of other cabinet meetings ago, we have significant infrastructure needs. We're going to accelerate 115 bridges and 2,000 miles of road that would not have been done otherwise through the state capital plan. By moving these projects up into the plan, these are things that will be, construction will begin this year. We're coordinating in new ways. We're doing regional contracts, 115 bridges. That would normally be 115 different contracts. It's slow, it's cumbersome. We'll have 3, 4, 5 contracts with 20 bridges each in each region, allows us to execute, get people working more quickly, fix the infrastructure more quickly. And the state investment of $232 million brings us additional federal funding through the formula of $917 million. So all the things that we talked about, the governor said, I want a new way of doing this, an intelligent way, before I even spend a dollar, I think you see in examples like this. I'll go through these quickly because it's the same thing in every area. For the first time, reinvesting in flood control projects. We understand how important that is. We saw the effects of failing to invest over the course of the summer. We have 106 flood control structures in New York total. 91 of the 106 are deficient in some way. We have 24 high and intermediate hazard dams that need attention. We have coastal erosion along the beaches as well. We'll coordinate that because DEC, as great an agency as it is, it's not in the business of construction. So we have legislation that the legislature approved that allows us to use DASNY for the design and construction of these projects so they can do what they do well and Joe Martens and his team can do what they do well. And again, you see the leverage here. It's $102 million toward these projects, leveraging another $100 million in federal funds. Park system, if you've been to a state park, you know there's been disinvestment over the years, 83% in deteriorated conditions. The largest capital program in the history of the state for parks in this budget. If there wasn't so much else in this budget, this would be a marquee item, but it's just one of many. Again, using DASNY to design and construct, because it's not what parks do, will serve many, many people. These are 48 parks, every region of the state, 37 million people. It's economic development as well as putting people to work and improving the communities where our citizens live. MTA, we talked about as folks were coming in before, an extremely difficult problem solved. I think 6 months ago, 8 months ago, people around the state were saying it is an insolvable problem. The legislature came together approving the governor's plan for full funding of the MTA capital plan. Thousands of jobs all across the state, by the way, not just in New York City, come through these projects. A $22 billion capital plan creating thousands of jobs. It includes $770 million of direct funding. The other funding that it leverages will make up the $13 billion gap, and Joe will be available to talk more about that. The Tappan Zee Bridge, if you've been down to the Tappan Zee Bridge lately, you know that work has already begun. If you go over the bridge, you look over the side, you will see piles out there, you'll see barges out there. They're beginning the testing, early work. We have money in this budget that continues the early work on the Tappan Zee Bridge. We're continuing to work on the financial plan for the Tappan Zee Bridge to get it fully beginning toward the end of this year as well. That's $5 billion and tens of thousands of jobs just for that project as well. The Governor spoke about the energy superhighway. All the things that we need to do in New York in order to keep business here, grow business, require power. New York is blessed with a power supply. That power supply isn't all in the right place. And so the challenge in New York is to make sure that the power that's available gets to the place where it's needed. And we'll be kicking this off on April 4th. Gil Quinones is leading a task force with Joe to put together a plan for the energy superhighway. We'll be putting out requests for information and requests for proposals that will complete a statewide network to bring that supply of low-cost energy to the places where we need it, and there's some funding to begin that in the plan this summer. All of this altogether you will find completely transparent. Every one of the projects, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them that get funded through the New York Works program, will be available on the New York Works website. You go to the map, you click on one of the projects, you get project information, more detailed information, who got the contract, how much is the contract, when did it start, where is it in the process, when is it supposed to be completed. All there, every one of these projects. That website, a prototype is up now. We'll be filling in projects across all of these agencies. So it's not just at DOT or Parks or DEC. That is where we're heading to. The goal, Governor, you set for us to make New York State the place to live and invest, not just about investing money in infrastructure, but building better communities. People want to invest here, they want to live here, they want to work here, and I don't think there's been a more radical investment and transformation in all of these areas in decades in New York State.
Well said. Well done.
Thank you, Howard. I think just building on what Howard said about making New York the best place to live, the governor also recognizes how important it is to help communities of all types, because New York is so proud of its tradition of diversity and inclusion and is a progressive state. And we've done many things in the last 15 months under the leadership of Governor Cuomo to show that. And in this budget, we continue to that philosophy and that ideal of making sure we are doing what government can to make New York State the best place for everybody who lives here. And one of the very exciting initiatives in the budget is the Office of New Americans, which our Secretary of State, Cesar Perales, will lead. It's incredibly timely and appropriate, and is going to be a place within the state where, again, we're going to coordinate, be efficient, and provide expanded access to English language education services, and promote U.S. citizenship and civic involvement, and expand business opportunities for the many New Yorkers who are from so many different places. So that's one very exciting thing. Another thing that's particularly exciting and important is we are going to, in this budget, increase public assistance. There will be a 5% increase effective July 2012 and another in October 2012. This completes a series of increases, I think, since the first time in 20 years. It's so important. You all know it. The more money we put in our community, the more people spend, the more people buy and support small businesses, the better off we all are. And so this is a very significant thing. Of course, building on Howard, rebuilding communities includes education. Community colleges are economic drivers. They educate our future workforce and retrain our existing workforce, problems that we know our state confronts. And they're our partner with business to ensure that we have a workforce that matches our market. And this year in the budget, there's an additional $31 million to expand in those areas and help keep tuition down so that people in this state have the best opportunity possible to get the best job they can here. Of course, housing is incredibly important, and we know that all across the country there have been many challenges, and in New York, so the budget also commits $14.3 million to support 208 different programs that are community-based. Community-based organizations are the programs that are out in the field and are best able to meet the needs of our diverse population in our very, very diverse state. And that's very exciting. And we all know, everybody knows how much our country and our state's been impacted by mortgage foreclosure prevention. And we're particularly excited that there's $9 million to support mortgage foreclosure counseling and services that are so desperately needed. And of course, our superintendent of DFS, Benjamin Lawsky, he's announced this previously, has a foreclosure relief unit. So we are doing everything we can to keep people in their homes because, again, it's along the same theory. If you are home and in a home, it's better for all of us. It's better for our economy. So we want to do everything we can to make sure you're able to stay that way. A very, very exciting initiative in juvenile justice, it's something the governor has spoken about many times, is close to home. And in partnership with New York City, we are working to make sure that young people who are in certain types of facilities now will end up in community-based and different types of facilities near their home so that they can maintain the relationships with their families and loved ones so they can have the support they need to transition from whatever kind of activity that they've been involved in that's negative to positive. So this is really exciting, and I think our Deputy Secretary Liz Glazer has been instrumental in making this happen, and it's so important that we are providing young people with training and positive opportunities so that they can turn their lives around. And that's just a few of the things that we're doing in this budget, and it's really kind of just a snapshot. I think there's so many things that are very exciting that are community-based, and it's been an honor to be a part of this process, even though I do think I deserve a few nights of sleep. Governor.
Thank you, Myra. As I said, the whole team and the expanded team really did an amazing job. And the men and women in your agencies who've worked on this process did an extraordinary job. I'll tell you what's nice about this. All of you have done dozens of events presenting the state of the state and the budget. If you go back and look at the state of the state or look at the budget, and you can go almost line for line. We said we were going to do this, and we got it done. Promises made, promises kept. And that's very important. We had a very ambitious agenda that we laid out in the state of the state, and in this budget agreement, it delivers on virtually every item. So, well done. When the bills are finally passed, then we'll take more time, especially we'll go area by area, but we wanted to give you an overview today. The legislature will be voting on the bills through the week, basically. The votes will primarily be on Thursday, I think, but by the end of the week it should be wrapped up. So, all good news. Questions from our friends in the press? Rick?
The latest lobbying reports are in, and the Committee to Save New York spent almost $12 million last year. It's one of those new record highs. Some of their lobbying was on the budget. Is there too much money that goes into lobbying on the budget and other things?
You know, do we spend too much money lobbying, period? You know, I think we set a record almost every year in lobbying, and in a perfect situation, that would obviously be reduced. This is not a perfect situation. People have legal rights. There have been court cases about free speech, and people have a desire to make their voice heard. So I don't begrudge them that. But is it a perfect system? No, of course not.
They say the second time's easier. This is now your second budget.
No, it's not. It's really not.
I was going to ask you to characterize on a personal level. Was this year easier, do you think, than last year? How do they compare?
No, in some ways it's harder the second time, because when you do it the first time, then the expectation is you can do it the second time, right? To do it the first time was actually easier because nobody believed you could do it the first time. So the expectation game gets reversed in some ways. I think it depends on what you're trying to do. Last year was difficult because we inherited an incredibly difficult situation financially, and we were walking into an incredibly dysfunctional situation. And you put those two things together. The numbers were staggering. The financial deficit, $10 billion, and the system was dysfunctional, and the relationship between the executive and the legislature was dysfunctional. So that was the difficulty last year. This year, in some ways, the degree of difficulty went up by our own ambition. We laid forth a very ambitious agenda in the State of the State in the budget because the state needed it, right? The needs were that great, and it's a very broad agenda. So we in some ways set the bar very high, which we needed to because that's what the people deserved. This budget meets that bar, and that's what I'm proud of. But it may have been easier this year in two regards. One, we bifurcated the work, if you will. A couple of weeks ago, we passed a number of large, difficult, controversial bills, and then we did the remainder of the budget. So that made it somewhat easier. And also, we have now a good working relationship with the legislature. You know, that is also a moment in time, but at this moment in time, it's a good working relationship with the legislature. And we've worked together for 15 months, and we've tackled very difficult issues together, and we've developed a relationship and a level of trust that serves this building well and serves the state well. And it actually makes it easier to get a lot of these complex issues done. I mean, even when you're just going through these top lines, you're building bridges, you're building roads, you know, billions of dollars. The relationship and the level of trust is important in making these types of decisions, and we've enjoyed a good one with the legislature through this process.
Governor, do you think that you're ever going to be able to reach a point where you could talk about cutting taxes as opposed to, you know, keeping the status quo or holding the taxes steady or capping them at 2% like that?
I would love to. I would love to. No one would love to more than me, Kyle. If you can tell me what the economy is going to do, I'll tell you when we can have that conversation. But yeah, you would need growth in the economy.
Have you given any more thought to an executive order for the health exchanges?
Yes, we're going to do it.
When?
This week.
Can you give me details on how that would be set up, or is it too early for that?
It's too early for that.
Governor?
The legislature has declined, for those of you who haven't followed it every day, the legislature has declined to include a health exchange in the budget, so we will set it up by executive order.
One of the criticisms in the past has been that the state has added too much debt. Are you concerned at all that there is a lot of borrowing as part of this plan and what it might do for future budgets down the road?
Bob, do you want to address that? Debt, are you concerned about the...
No, I think there was, again, any extra debt that we did, that Howard talked about, a lot of it was accelerating projects that had already been on the books into the current year, so we're reducing our debt load in the out years. As well, any incremental debt that was in this budget, we're funding with one-time resources so that we're not even doing borrowing, we're doing pay-go. So this is a very responsible budget with respect to borrowing.
Governor, you highlighted the creation of the Office of New Americans. What's your position on the New York Dream Act?
Well, there are, first is a federal DREAM Act, which I fully support, which basically offers a pathway to citizenship, which you can do on the federal level because the federal government obviously controls the citizenship laws. There are a number of DREAM Acts that are being spoken about for New York, roughly analogized to the federal DREAM Act. First, I think it's important to remember the federal DREAM Act is different because the federal DREAM Act is about citizenship. You can't do that on a state level. You know, I wish I could as a governor, but I can't. So I can't offer any program that can suggest citizenship to a person. But to the extent there are federal DREAM Acts, meaning let's find ways, creative ways to incentivize educational opportunities for new immigrants, that concept I fully support, and we'll be working on ways to do that. But calling them a state DREAM Act, likening it to a federal DREAM Act, is confusing. A state really can't make the American dream a reality, which is you can stay in this country, you can stay in this country legally, and you can be a citizen. Only the federal government can do that.
I think the governor's not education assistance for
Well, if it is, well, then it's not really the, yes, but then it's not analogized to the federal DREAM Act. On educational assistance, we're going to be working with the legislature to come up with a number of options and exploring a number of options to extend educational benefits.
There was talk of including...
Excuse me one second. You know, the Senate rejected the DREAM Act a couple of weeks ago in New York, one of the quote-unquote DREAM Acts. I'm sorry.
So there was talk of including a language in the budget that would have shielded teacher evaluations from public view, either in whole or in part, either the part that is data or just in general, similar to cops and firefighters. So I was wondering what your position on that was, whether you would support that.
There was talk of that. I was against including it in the budget. I support exploring the issue in the future.
And why?
Because it's an important issue. It's a controversial issue, but there are two sides to it. And I said I would work on the issue with the legislature in the future.
Well, I mean, do you have an initial reaction to what your inkling or your inclination would be towards
My inclination is the parent has a right to know the evaluation information of the teacher. So I think the parent's right to know is important and should be protected.
Governor, given that the legislature is about to approve an on-time, if not early budget, do you think that warrants a pay raise for them this year?
Let's do one thing at a time. Let them pass the budget, and we'll deal with that issue down the road. By the way, I do believe, put the pay raise aside for a second, I do believe, and it's a little premature because they haven't voted yet, and you know, as I like to say many, many times, it's not done until it's done, especially in this town. But I believe, assuming they vote on the budget, which I anticipate, I think this legislature has done a great job, this legislative session. And these past 15 months have been extraordinarily difficult. We had many problems to deal with. We had a very difficult budget last year. We then came back and did a second, what was the equivalent of a budget in December when we came with the tax legislation package. That was incredibly difficult. 2 weeks ago, we did a package of legislation that had eluded progress for years and years. And now this budget. So it's not just that they have passed a good budget. They have done I think, an extraordinary job as a group, as a collective. So I do think they deserve praise and applaud for their work.
When you talk about, going back to Lisa's question, the parents have a right to know on the evaluations. I mean, do you believe that they should be released publicly? Do you believe that, you know, the first test should be released, or there should be a delay in when these things are released? Can you just expand on what you mean in that situation?
Those are the right questions, Ken, and there's subtleties here. I believe parents have a right to know. I believe teachers have a right to privacy to some extent. You currently cannot get the evaluation of a police officer. You can't get the evaluation of a firefighter. You can't get the evaluation of a correction officer. They are exempt from the Freedom of Information law. Why? Because we, government, courts, have found that the individual's right to privacy outweighs the public's right to know. I believe in the case of teachers, the parent's right to know outweighs the teacher's right to privacy. After that, it's less clear to me. And that's why I think it warrants conversation. But not in the budget. I didn't support it in the budget because it's not really a budget financial item. And it's a complicated issue that's going to take time.
The mayor has said without a public disclosure portion of it, you might as well not have a teacher evaluation system.
I spoke to the mayor about it. I believe the mayor said he supports the parents' right to know. I don't believe the mayor was saying we should take names of teachers and put them on posters and publish their scores and put them on a stake and put it in front of the house. I think he was correctly making the point that the parents have a legitimate right to know.
Without,
That's what that's what's going to take time to work through.
Earlier this year, you said to me that the CFE decision was, as you put it, quote-unquote, paid off, and the Assembly Speaker said part of foundation aid is going to be going to pay the CFE decision. Can you just clarify this for me? I'm just not...
Well, it depends what you mean by CFE, Mark. If you're talking about a legal case, that's one thing. If what CFE has come to mean is equality in funding, equity in funding, that we're not doing enough for poorer districts, and that we have to improve education in the poorer districts. I believe 100% that we have to improve education in poorer districts. By the way, I believe we have to improve education in richer districts. I believe we have to inject performance into the education system by and large. That's why teacher evaluations are important. That's why having an agreement with SED on a statewide teacher evaluation was important. That's why the 4% linked to the teacher evaluations on the local level is important. We also have reforms, by the way, to teacher arbitration process in this budget, which will make the arbitration process work better. I believe that's part of performance in education. So have we done enough for education? Have we perfected education? The answer is no. And to the extent people use CFE as a symbol, a metaphor for that concept, then I would agree.
The Speaker was saying something about the foundation aid going towards...
I don't know. You'd have to ask the Speaker.
$7 billion that
I
they
don't,
said?
yeah, Mark, I don't know. You'd have to ask the Speaker.
Governor, some legislators have asked questions about regional councils. I know that they push to have more legislative involvement in the awarding of funds to regional councils and the scoring of CFA applications. I don't believe this budget does that. And I'm just wondering, what input do legislators have on the distribution of these economic development projects?
Jimmy, the regional councils are a structure that was set up last year that's working quite well. The legislators are ex officio members of the regional councils, but they're part of the regional council one way or the other. They may not be official members of the regional council, but look, their input is very important. They are elected by the people of the district, and I respect that. And they have a very high level of knowledge, by definition, of state government and the needs of the people. So I want their input in the regional council. And I think any regional council that's doing its job intelligently, is going to take seriously the advice of the assemblyman or the senator. That's not an issue. I don't think it's not in the budget per se. But, you know, that was true last year. That's true this year.
No member items this year?
No member items this year.
Talk about why, given what you just said about legislators knowing, having that intonation to their district.
A member item is different than, a regional council process is you're making selections through a competitive process based on need. Member items, basically the legislator is the selector, right? So there's a difference. I value the advice and the input of the legislators. I think they can be very helpful to the regional council. The New York Works Board also has legislative input in it, but member items per se, we don't have any money for new member items in this budget.
Forgive me if this goes to stagecraft, but usually the closing down of the budget involves sort of a red room involving the speaker and the majority leader and the governor. Will you be having that kind of event after the voting takes place?
Yes.
The $3.5 billion in private investment for the New York Works Fund, do you need a law in place to be able to leverage that money, or is there some other mechanism in financing from the private sector?
Let me ask Bob or Howard if they...
No, I think in most cases, we can either leverage off existing state spending or off of federal spending that exists. I don't think it requires any legislation.
I mean, for private investment in public projects, wouldn't you need a law?
It's not, you're confusing it with a P3 public-private partnership. That is separate. That would require a legal change. That's something the governor supports. This is a very typical, the state provides incentive to private businesses to invest in the state. Best example of that recently is here, the $250 million in investment in nanotech, leveraging $4 billion of private investment, and that's what we're looking for in terms of leverage.
Can you talk a little bit about the way that state education aid is being divided up and whether there was any consideration to certain districts that are struggling to make ends meet as they deal with the 2% tax cap?
I think the difference in education this year was we had agreed to a 4% quote-unquote cap. Actually, we didn't agree to a 4% cap. We agreed to an index that this year comes out to about 4%. But one of the major reforms we made last year, and one of the reasons why you saw those out-year deficits in the chart that Bob did when it was so dramatic, in permanent law, the increases for education and Medicaid were about 13%. And if you factored out those 13% increases, that's where you saw that line go. We changed the quote-unquote permanent law to say we'll have rational indices for both Medicaid and education. And rather than pick an arbitrary number that we can't afford anyway, we'll have an index that is actually grounded in economic realities as opposed to political realities. That index this year comes out to about 4%. We all agreed the beginning of the year that we would live within the 4%. So it really then just becomes a question of the allocation of that number. And you raised the 2 points that are always in competition and need to be balanced. Higher income districts say we deserve to get more money back because we paid in more money. Higher need districts say we have a greater need, we should get more funding. And that balance, it has to be struck between the Senate and the Assembly, and it was done in this budget. We can give you the actual runs. I think they're actually online now. But that tension between those two has been in existence as long as I've been watching the budget debate.
I guess what I was trying to ask, I apologize if I didn't make this clear, but how throughout the state the money was split up. Sometimes there's criticism that too much goes to districts on Long Island, for example. Other times upstate districts say they should get more, and how do you...
What this legislature is saying, we think it was done fairly. I'm sure there'll be people, everyone from every region will say their region didn't get enough, and people from rich districts will say poor districts got too much, but this legislature, by definition, will say they thought it was done as fairly as they could get it done, is what they'll say. By the way, you guys should also look, there's a very big mandate relief package in this budget. The pension reform piece that was done 2 weeks ago, and then this budget has the state assuming the Medicaid pickup, the 3% that the counties now pay. The state will be assuming that 3% over 3 years. So between the pension reform and picking up the Medicaid 3%, that is a big deal for local governments. Yancey?
Governor, when do you want the Gaming Commission and the New York Works Commission both up and running? And also, what's the realistic expectation for when the New York Works will actually start funding and announcing projects like that?
Howard, when does New York Works start funding?
The RFPs for New York Works have gone out. Are they out? For some of the projects actually have already begun, anticipating that we would have funding contingent on that. That process will continue. These are projects that go in the ground in 2012.
RFP went out, Yancey, before they even voted on the law. How's that for efficiency? I was waiting to see how you answered that one. Gaming Commission goes into effect October 1? Yes. October 1.
Bob's question.
Excuse me one second, Jimmy. Yancey, the Gaming Commission will have more definition next year when we decide what we're actually doing in the gaming arena. Pardon the pun.
Mr. Mayor, are we borrowing? In terms of the capital, how much are we raising the debt limits and how much are we borrowing?
Well, again, we're not raising the debt limit. Again, most of what we're doing is, and Howard explained it, is we're moving projects, he just said it, so that we get them going in 2012. We're actually reducing our debt exposure in the out years by moving that forward. There's, well, it's $700 million in projects that are being moved forward as part of New York Works.
We'll be borrowing that for your gas and ESP.
But again, we have a significant amount of capital projects that we do in every year, and there's planning that goes out. Again, this has been focused on getting the right projects going in the right time frame. I think it's fair to say we have not really changed our borrowing profile. You always have to look at borrowing over a multi-year period. We have not really changed our borrowing profile. We've kind of increased it now and smoothed it out and lowered it in the out years.
Governor, in the presentation, it was said that your administration is continuing to work on a financial plan for the Tappan Zee Bridge. At what point do you move toward fleshing that out publicly?
What is the timetable, Tom, on it? What's the next step on the Tappan Zee?
The deliberations and the studies are in progress right now. We have a financial advisor who's dedicated to the project, and we're required to put forward a financial plan when and if we're invited to apply for that large $2 billion TIFIA loan. So we're hoping to be invited within the next several weeks, and we'll need to put a plan, complete the plan probably within the next month or so.
So it depends on the outcome of your TIFIA application?
No, the TIFIA application requires that we submit a financial plan. So it's not completed yet, but those deliberations are still in progress.
Governor, would you ever consider a codification of the 2% cap on state spending?
The legislature has been posed to the legislature many times in the past, and they haven't wanted to do it. We do it as our own mandate, if you will. It's what we've said that local government should be able to live within. Now, by the way, 2% property tax cap, obviously. They have a 2% property tax cap, and remember, this year, we're assuming many of their costs with the Medicaid pickup, et cetera. So we are still within the 2%. I think we're actually 1.9%. Congratulations to all of you. I know it was a long road and a long haul, and I know we're not there yet. They still have to vote, and until they vote, but it's been a really great job. So congratulations to all of you. Thank you.